Valentine's Day 2002. I was diagnosed with stage 3B breast cancer. My prognosis was less than 5 years. My treatment would be chemotherapy followed by surgery. Then suddenly, that July, humiliated and disgraced, I entered the Maricopa County Jail to await sentencing for securities fraud. I went to my mastectomy shackled, belly chained, and handcuffed. No family or friends were present. No one touched me but the surgeons with their knives and the nurses with their needles and the guards with their handcuffs. I'd lost 28 lymph nodes along with my breast, and the surgeon issued an order to the jail for a pillow to cushion and protect my arm from lymphedema. Order denied. No pillows were allowed in the jail. When I got back to the hospital, the women packed into my cell to see how I was. Breaking a huge rule, they hugged me. The first hugs I'd received. Aren't hugs wonderful? These tough women were so upset about the pillow rule, they left my cell grumbling. And a few hours later, they were back with an order of their own. Hold out your hands, Sue Ellen, and close your eyes. And I felt the softest thing. It was a pillow. Where on earth did this come from? I brought it to show you today. It did not come in a Tiffany bag. I know what you're thinking. What the heck is that? These are the sanitary pads that the jail issues you for your period. These Now you're going to make me cry. These tough women contributed their precious state-issue supplies and wove them together to form this tufted square. Then they used the small golf pencil that we were all issued, that was our writing tool, to punch holes in the ends of the pads. And then they shredded one pad into a thin strip for like ribbon, and they wove that, sewing it with the pencil. And they tied little bows at the end to keep it firm, and then they fringed it to give it that designer look. At the darkest time of my life, the drug addicts, the prostitutes, and the murderers looked after me, and I will never forget them. So March 18th, coming up, 2009, I was finally free. I started working in the criminal justice system because I found my purpose and my second act in prison. In 8 years, I've worked to bring education inside the women's prison, and I've worked to bring education outside to the general public by drawing attention to the horror of our prison system, especially if you're sick. I watched my cellmate die of leukemia because the prison kept denying her a simple blood test. She was so sick. And when they finally took her to the hospital, her red blood count was 300,000 and her white blood count was 0. I've never seen a body shut down. The pain was excruciating, and Gina was only 25. Her 3-year sentence became a death sentence. After her death, I asked if we could have a cancer walk in October. I didn't know it had never been done before. The prison staff looked at me like I had 3 heads, but they finally agreed. We decorated the yard with pink construction paper. The place looked like a Pepto-Bismol explosion. And we walked around the track and raised $10,000 for the American Cancer Society. That was in 2003, and that walk is still going on in prisons all over Arizona, raising money for cancer. If you had told me what I was going to see and experience when I went to prison, I would have said, not in our country. We don't treat people that way. I was wrong. We do. And being sick is especially terrifying. So my second act is to educate the public, you, about the draconian $80 billion prison business. It's a business. America is the incarceration nation, incarcerating more people per capita than Russia or China. In prison, I encountered a lot of single mothers there because of addiction. Their children were being raised by others. In America, 1 in 28 children has a parent in prison. In America, every 26 seconds, a child drops out of school. In America, 1 in 3 people now has a criminal record. How is that acceptable in America? January 3rd, 2016, 7 years after I was freed, I was waiting for Downton Abbey to start, and my phone rang. Some fans. ID unknown. I don't answer ID unknown. Rang again. Ignored it. Rang again. This time voicemail. Okay, I'll listen. Miss Allen, this is XYZ at the White House calling. Would you please call me back as soon as possible? Oh, sure. The White House is calling me? I don't think so. Did you know you can Google the White House? Nice operators 24/7. So I called just to verify it wasn't a hoax. I gave them the name of the staffer left on my voicemail, and the operator said, yes, ma'am, that is one of our staffers. Okay, I thought, I guess I better call back. The call was an invitation to be one of 23 Americans to sit in the First Lady's box at President Obama's final State of the Union message last year. I was to represent criminal justice reform. I was very cool. You know I'm an ex-felon. Yes, ma'am, he said. We know all about you. A week later, I was on a whirlwind trip to Washington, D.C., where I was interviewed by NBC in front of the White House and BBC on the radio. I met with the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, me, a former inmate. I attended a gorgeous reception at the White House, and it seemed more like a movie than real life. I met Mrs. Obama and Dr. Biden, and then I rode in a motorcade to the Capitol with the sirens blazing. Looking down from the First Lady's box in the historic chamber of the House of Representatives, I could see all of our congressional leaders, the Supreme Court justices, the cabinet, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, just like on TV. Then, in a flash, it was over. Our security detail came to escort us, I thought, back to the motorcade to the White House. But instead, they took us into a long hallway where we waited and we waited. Finally, I asked, why? Don't you know Sue Ellen? From another person standing in line. We're going to meet the president and have our picture taken. Oh my goodness. My first thought was pure vanity. My lipstick is in my purse and it's in the limousine in the motorcade. I don't have my lipstick. We inched to the door, and then it was my turn, and there stood the president. He beamed at me and gave me a great hug. He's a great hugger. And I thanked him for visiting a prison the summer before. We had a brief chat, and then he turned me just right to make sure that the picture was perfect. And it was. In June of last year, I was invited back to speak at a panel on criminal justice at a White House-sponsored summit, the United State of Women. And in November, I went back one last time to speak to a group of leaders in justice reform, led by Attorney General Lynch and Presidential Advisor Valerie Jarrett. Their message inspired us to continue our work and never give up on our purpose or our vision. Do you make New Year's resolutions or set goals? I don't. Because if I did, never, ever would I have set a goal that one day I would be sitting in the First Lady's box at the State of the Union in our nation's capital. It's like saying I'm going to win an Oscar without even being in a movie. It's what I call God's magic. It's the reason we can never give up. Life can change in an instant to terrify you, like when you hear the words, "You've got cancer." It can also change in an instant to thrill you, like when the White House calls, and the results give you your second act, the kind of power and attention it deserves. It's God's magic. I ask you all to remember God's magic and God's message that after cancer, and often because of cancer, there is life and purpose and passion. All of these incredible women here today are examples that cancer can give us the power to grow stronger so we can show up, speak up, and do stuff in our second act.